Okay, well, it is wonderful to see you, Terry, and wonderful to see your beautiful girls. Hi. Et je veux commencer en vraiment appuyer mon cher collègue Stephen Guilbeault pour son excellent discours. Et je veux vraiment souligner à quel niveau je suis d'accord avec lui que c'est le moment pour vraiment avoir du justice dans notre travail avec les géants du technologie. Et je suis complètement d'accord avec lui que le moment est arrivé. Dans l'énoncé économique de l'automne, on a dit que le Canada va lever un impôt sur les services digitaux au début de 2022. En manière unilatérale si ce sera nécessaire. Mais je suis aussi d'accord avec Stephen que j'ai beaucoup d'optimisme sur la possibilité de faire ça en manière multilatérale. Cette semaine, j'ai eu une excellente réunion bilatérale avec la secrétaire Janet Yellen et on a discuté ce sujet et aussi on a eu des bonnes conversations sur ça au niveau de G7 et G20. Alors, Stephen, on va faire ça. On va faire ça dans une manière collaborative avec nos alliés autour du monde et je t'appuie fortement. Okay. Great to be here tonight. Hi everyone. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. Je suis très ravie d'être parmi vous ce soir. And I am especially happy because I have a chance to talk to, and we all have a chance to listen to, a truly great Canadian and a great Liberal, the amazing Ken Dryden. So Ken, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It is a pleasure, and I have to say it's a real honor. I want to start, Ken, by asking you how you tackled the huge challenge which another great Canadian Liberal, the amazing Paul Martin, handed to you after the 2004 election. Liberals had campaigned on a promise to spend $5 billion and to build universal early learning and childcare. That's a big promise, and we all know as politicians that the hard work actually starts the day after the election, when you have to really figure out in very practical terms, how do you make that promise a reality? And Ken, you came so achingly close. You got pretty far along the road. So tell me how you started off.
First of all, thanks for inviting me. I'm really glad to have the chance to have this opportunity, or this conversation. Paul Martin, a couple of weeks after the election, gave me a call and asked me if I would be the Minister of Social Development. And one of the responsibilities had to do with early learning and childcare. And so, as you say, the real question is, it was one of the big promises in the campaign. So how do we deliver on that promise? And one of the challenges was that there had been a lot of promises that had been made over more than a decade, really, in terms of childcare. And so while there was some enthusiasm amongst the public and the advocates for the program, the question was that could we deliver, and were we really serious about delivering? And the first thing we had to do is to try to persuade people that no, actually we are serious, that this was a promise that was made in a campaign, and it's time. It's time to deliver on it. And the first really big question, I think, was that, as you mentioned, the promise was really in two parts. It was $5 billion over 5 years, and then it was to create a system of early learning and childcare across the country. And those are two different things that can be achieved in different ways. And so the question was, what was the most basic promise, the most important promise? And to me, what it was the second one. It was, how do you create a system of early learning and childcare across the country? The $5 billion over 5 years was the most important instrument that we had at that moment to set that in motion. But the question is that once 5 years is up, were we still going to be around? Were we genuinely serious? And programs come and go, systems come and stay. And so that was the first thing, is to make sure that we had that kind of understanding. Because if we did, then that would determine what the real strategy was and how to deal with the advocates and how to deal with the provinces in it. And then it got interesting. And so the question, was in it is that systems, I mean, in my mind, I had two reference points. I had the healthcare system and the education system. And both of them took a long time to evolve. They started from next to nothing. They were somewhat haphazard and random. There were lots of different ways in which they were delivered. They were far from universal. But the key with a system is, again, that it's going to be around tomorrow. If you can create it, it will stay. And it would be extremely difficult for any subsequent government of any party to then dismantle it. And so that was the task. And it was to try to persuade the advocates, first of all. And that was an interesting, it was an interesting conversation, because they, as all of us know, anybody who works in childcare is dedicated. They are committed. They have been doing this for years and years and years, and they believe in the importance of it. The problem that they had over all of these years is, one, the promises that were made were not kept. And second of all, what that left them with was small fights to fight. And so, it may have to do with, to ensure that the next money that is spent is for a public delivery as opposed to private delivery. An important question, but as we were trying to get across to them, is that this is the time to fight the big fight. That in fact, if we're serious, and we're going to be serious, then this is the big fight. And so engage this big fight, and know that when you create a system, as healthcare was and education was, you're not going to have something that is perfect at the beginning. You're going to learn as you do. You're going to discover some of the things that don't work. You're going to discover what works better. The public is going to develop an appetite. You may be leading the things at the beginning, but if you do it right, you're going to be following the public. I mean, the public is going to have this appetite and taste for something that is more. That's what happened with healthcare. That's what happened with education. And so that was the initial focus, the initial reference point, and something that we never forgot as we were approaching things.
So, Ken, I have written down in big letters on my notebook here, fight the big fight and build systems. And that is such excellent advice for early learning and childcare, and I would say in general for being effective in government. Et je suis complètement d'accord avec vous en ce qui concerne un système, et que si on peut créer un système, on aura quelque chose qui durera. Et je pense que le Québec démontre ça pour tout le Canada. Et nous ne devons maintenant, en ce qui concerne les garderies, nous ne devons pas maintenant regarder les exemples des autres pays. Nous avons l'excellent exemple du Québec qui a fait ça et qui a déjà les résultats excellents au niveau économique, au niveau social. Et comme vous avez dit, au niveau d'appui social pour cet système. Alors, un excellent conseil. And listening to you, Ken, it reminds me of so many conversations I've had with my excellent colleague, Ahmed Hussein, precisely around this issue of building a system that lasts. And I love the parallels with healthcare and public education. But, you know, I'm a politician. You've been a politician. And there can be this anxiety in politics that if you don't deliver immediately, if you don't show results tomorrow, it will be hard to maintain the support of Canadians. It will be hard to keep them patient and with you. How do you think we should approach that challenge with early learning and childcare? The trade-off between delivering tomorrow and building a system, because building a system, Ken, it takes time, right?
Well, I think that's entirely correct, and I think that we go back again to the examples of the education system and the healthcare system. If those arguments were front and center 100 years ago, 150 years ago, however long it was ago, that serious discussions and considerations were there in terms of education and of healthcare, then people at that time would have said, well, you know, why begin? Like, what's the impact going to be? It's going to take so long to do it. That, you know, we don't know what the result is going to be, and that kind of thinking would have, you know, I mean, if that had predominated, we would have no education system, we would have no healthcare system. You know, I think all of us, all that we can do is say to ourselves, you know, what are those things that might have real impact? And using the example that you were saying and of you know, what are we going to see tomorrow? I think that that we have that in our minds, but there's another part of us as well, that sometime it will be 10 years from when we were members of parliament or members of cabinet, and it might be 20 years, and it will be looking back and saying, what did we do? What would we do? What did we do during that time? We did a whole lot of things that delivered something that was a little bit more interesting tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. But really, what impact? Why were we there? Why did we get involved in this? With what real purpose? How did we change things? How did we make things any better than they were? I mean, the first question, which seems like the hardest one, of, you know, how can you see the impact tomorrow? That's nothing like the question that all of us are going to be faced with, you know, by ourselves, let alone by others, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years from now. What do we get into this for? I mean, to just kind of manage our way. You know, things are basically okay, and we do. No, I mean, it's too clear now in terms of the importance of education and learning in our lives and in our children's lives. It's too clear now the effect of early learning on the development of a child, and whether it is the personal impact, the family impact, the community impact, the national impact. And so it's like, are you serious or not? I mean, is this about learning? Is this about preparation? Is this about the future? Is this about something important? Or is this just stuff?
Fight the big fights, Ken. And, you know, listening to you talk about the need to build for the future and be confident we can do that, it reminds me of so many conversations with our Prime Minister, with Prime Minister Trudeau. And of the advice, I would even say the instruction he gives to his cabinet, to his caucus. He is always telling us, we are here to make a difference. And he says something else, which is very related to what you've just said, Ken, which is trust Canadians. Canadians are smart. And by the way, just as a little footnote, we actually are smart. Did you know that Canada has the best educated people in the OECD? So it's not just bragging. But, you know, the Prime Minister has this great belief, trust Canadians, they're smart. If you're doing the right thing, they will support you. And I really believe that as politicians, as Liberals, as leaders, we have to trust Canadians that if we can lay out a vision to be transformative in positive ways, to build systems that will make Canada better, yes, today, but also 10 and 20 years from now, Canadians will support that. Canadians get that a transformative system is not built overnight. So I love your conviction that we can do it, and I share that so much.
Well, and as well as that, and it's along the same lines, is that, and it was one of the things that we faced in it, was that because the promises had been broken, because there wasn't a trust that they had, that others had in us, that what it meant was that so long as the sun was shining and the advocates felt as if you had to make every decision for the future right at that moment, because the next moment couldn't be trusted, and the moment after that couldn't be trusted. And it was as if everything had to be carved in stone. And as I would say back to people, is that no, I mean, what that suggests is that we are the smartest people in the history of the world, and we are the smartest people that will ever be in terms of the history of the world, that we have all of the answers right now. And what I would say back is that people a year from now will be smarter than us because they will have 1 year's experience and learning on us. And 5 years and 10 years and 15 years from now, they'll be 15 years smarter. And so again, you set it in motion. You set it in motion as best you can. You do it as well as you can with the biggest possible impact. And then it starts to roll. The appetite for it starts to present itself. People want more rather than questioning more and advocating less. No, this is and of course this to me is the absolute opportunity for it, because I mean, if we've learned a lot of lessons in the last year, but one of the lessons we've learned is how important our teachers are, our school system is, our childcare providers are, the childcare is. All of a sudden we have our kids at home a whole lot more, and we've got to try to find a way of helping them develop in this way. And we know much better now than we did a year ago how difficult that is, and I think that there's that much more of a respect than had been the case. And also a far better understanding of how a school system and a childcare system is really central to the way in which we live. I mean, the debate is over. I mean, it is part of our life. It is how we live now. It is how we are going to live tomorrow. It is how we, prepare and develop our kids. It's there. It's present. And for heaven's sakes, all that it requires is for any of us to just, reflect the experience that we've had in this last year, and to know how important this is. And not just, again, for the preparation of our kids, but the custodial care of it, the possibilities that it offers in terms of the parents being able to do things with do their work with a free and open mind and the way in which they need to do it. This is all central to the way we live.
Ken, I could not agree with you more passionately about what you've just said. And, you talked about how even in 2004, childcare advocates, and by the way, you are so right, they are the most passionate, committed people. But even then, they were skeptical. Could this actually be done? They had heard for so many years, so many governments saying, yes, we're going to try to do this. And I can tell you from my own life, I was 2 years old when the Royal Commission on the Status of Women said Canada needed an early learning and childcare system. And my mother, who was an amazing person, was a feminist in Northern Alberta then, and she fought for it. And I remember meetings in the kitchen in our house with my mom and her pals getting together and trying to build this. I was 2 years old, Ken. My eldest child is now 20, and we still don't have it. So I really understand that skepticism that advocates have. But one of the things that I think should give us all optimism on this is what you've just said, which is I really believe COVID has created a window of political opportunity and maybe an epiphany, as you put it, on the importance of early learning and childcare. When you were talking about people needing to do their jobs now with their kids underfoot, I saw Terry Beach kind of waving and sighing to us on the screen. And a lot of people who didn't have to worry about early learning and childcare, now COVID has brought it into their lives. And I think that creates a real opportunity for us. But I would add one more thing, which is one of the consequences of COVID, I think, is to have brought the economic arguments to the fore when it comes to making the case for early learning and childcare. Because we have seen what I consider to be an incredibly dangerous drop in the participation of women in the labor force, precisely because of the COVID impact that you have been talking about, Ken. And so, I believe in early learning and childcare because I want us to raise a generation of super kids, super Canadians, who have the best education possible from their early years. I believe in it because it's a feminist policy. But you know what? I am finance minister, and I believe in it because it is a surefire way to drive jobs and economic growth. It's actually a triple play, right? Because you have higher participation of women in the labor force. Quebec shows it. Quebec has the highest participation of women in the labor force with children under 3, not just in Canada, but in the whole world. Bravo, nos amis au Québec. Excellent. You create great jobs in early learning and childcare, and you give our kids a great, great start in life. And something that has really struck me, I have spent this week at IMF meetings. This is the week for the spring meetings of the World Bank and IMF. And at meetings of G7 finance ministers, G20 finance ministers, and the IMF governing body, the decline in women's participation in the labor force has come up. I may have raised it a few times myself, and the value of increasing that in our fight against COVID. And I'll tell you who are two of the people who are the most committed to this are Kamala Harris and Janet Yellen. And they have both told me how important early learning and childcare is from their perspective as a driver of the economic recovery. So my hope, and I want to see if you agree with me about this, is that being able to make that economic argument as well is going to be one of the ways that we get this done.
I think, again, the evidence of the last year, it's square in front of our faces. If it is there to be seen and not to be dismissed or denied or, it's there. I mean, my approach was always in terms of sort of the individual development. And I always thought that, that what is it that we can actually leave to our kids? I mean, we can, if we do well enough, we can leave a little bit of a nest egg here. We can, raise them in a certain way, and maybe that they will learn certain values. But one of the biggest things, and maybe the biggest thing that we can pass on, is the capacity to learn. I mean, that we have no idea what tomorrow is going to be like. We have to find a way of having the capacity to cope with tomorrow. And whether it is coping with tomorrow socially or politically or economically. I mean, that's the surest footing that we have. It is our minds, is our capacity to learn. It is the basis of any kind of successful economic system, is a well-educated population. And what is the understanding of the best kind of education available that at any particular point? 150 years ago, it was elementary school and maybe a little bit of high school. And then it was high school. And then in more recent years, it's colleges and universities. And now what it is as well is that it's early learning and childcare. They're all part of a piece. They're all part of learning preparation, getting our kids as ready as possible for the future. And if that isn't, bedrock economics, I don't know what is.
Well, Ken, je suis complètement d'accord avec vous. Et je veux finir en vous remercier fortement. Vraiment, je veux vous remercier pour la conversation, mais surtout pour le travail historique que vous avez fait avec notre ami Paul Merton en 2004. Et vraiment, vous avez commencé le grand travail de créer, comme vous avez dit, un système de garderie, un système d'enseignement pour les plus jeunes Canadian. And look, guys, we're all liberals here. This is a liberal convention. I think it's so important to remember and to honor the really groundbreaking work that Ken and Paul did on this issue. It's been heartbreaking for me, Ken. I've been going back and looking at how much you accomplished, and it's been heartbreaking for me that we weren't able to just fully go all the way then. But I want to tell you, listening to you now, hearing how far you got, hearing how strong those arguments are, and also, by the way, hearing from you something that I really, really agree with, that COVID has created a real epiphany in our country. And I can say now, having just been hanging out with the world's finance ministers around the world about the importance of this issue. I really think, Ken, that now is the moment that Canada needs to get this done, that we need to build for the women of today and the parents of today. And sorry, guys, for just mentioning women in particular, but sadly, the reality is mothers still bear more of the burden. And for our youngest Canadians. So thank you very, very much for being so inspiring. Thank you for your hard work. I hope you know we're going to be calling on you for a lot of advice in the days to come. Et merci, chers collègues. Merci, chers amis libéraux autour du pays. C'était vraiment un plaisir pour moi d'être avec vous ce soir.
Merci, Chrystia.